Hey, let's talk about one of my favorite graphic designers, David Carson, and I'll explain why. Some of you may know him, some of you may have never heard of him, but I'd like to share a few of his projects with you so you can get an idea what makes him special. So, David Carson started out 80s, 90s as a designer and is still working today. He's most known for kind of his brash, kind of abstract style that breaks the rules. And that's what I like about him. He's one of those that talks about the rules and understands the rules of type and has worked in graphic design, but he also encourages you to ignore the rules and to use your intuition. So you may or may not be surprised to find out that he started out as a surfer and he is a self-taught designer. And so when he was young, spent a lot of time at the beach, still does, and was kind of influenced by that culture. One of those things, here's him surfing more recently. One of the things that he got into at that time period in the 80s when he started working professionally was kind of that street surf culture. And all of that was just kind of, irreverent and um, abstract and off the wall, right? So he applied that to his design style at the same time, where he didn't worry about things being the correct size or using the correct font or, spacing things and using the correct kerning or leading. He kind of let it happen. And I think that was possible because he also worked at a time period before computers. And so when he was crafting design, he wasn't using a computer to make things perfect and precise. In fact, this was the paste up era where you had to take a picture and then you had to actually paste on letters and do your layouts by hand. And I think that's one of the things that he benefited from was kind of growing up and starting out in that time period right before the computer so that when the computer came along, he still kind of rejected that controlled style. And here's a quote from someone. He uses type the way a painter uses paint to create emotion to express ideas. I love that description because it's true. He isn't trying to be precise and perfect like, say, the Swiss designers or maybe, that Bauhaus idea. Instead, he's being much more reactionary. He's just taking an impression of the message and playing with it. So, one of his most notable works was when he was art director designer for Ray Gun, which was kind of a underground magazine for music and culture and other things. And so his work again was done by hand. So you have cutouts, plastered and pasted together, different text pressed on or painted on, sprayed on. That really leads to this grungy style, which for us, years later, we look at it and we go, hey, that's cool. How would I create that now? Well, I guess I'd have to go to Photoshop and try some texture brush and do some, photo montage. Well, there's also a very direct approach, which is just do it by hand. And that's, I think, what he's able uh, to show is that there is a place for this type of design, a more artistic, abstract design. This is one of his most famous quotes. Don't mistake legibility for communication. Such a clever and interesting way to get that idea across that just because you can read something and just because it's simple and well designed and beautiful doesn't mean you've really communicated the message. And so he's on this side of the scale where your goal isn't just to make something beautiful. Your goal is to communicate. And sometimes communication has more to do with the decoration and the style and the process than just what's visible on the page, if that makes sense. He also had this book, The End of Print, which, as he likes to say, was reprinted 4 or 5 times. He has a great sense of humor. There are lots of videos you can find of him speaking online, and it's fun to hear him talk about his career. But that clever idea of print is dead, but I'm going to sell a book about it, hundreds of thousands of times, right? So I just love the way it's not about, the perfect Adobe computer style. It's actually very expressive. And don't you just love how he uses different letters to build, I'm sorry, different letter shapes to build the letters? And so instead of using an I, he uses a one, and so on. Kind of cool. He would say that maybe sometimes, if there were a billboard, sometimes maybe a damaged billboard with a torn edge is more interesting and catches your attention more than that perfect, crisp, clean, well-designed billboard. And I think um, he has something there where when we see it, we live in this world of the same, the same, the same, different. Oh, that's what gets our attention. So here's a couple tips that come from him. Number one, break the rules. There are no rules. Go with what you think is right. Now, I like to say as a teacher, before you can break the rules, you need to become familiar with and understand the rules. Um, because not everybody that breaks the rules is good at it. And how can you judge something and say, well, he's good at breaking the rules while someone else breaking the rules isn't? That's a judgment call. That becomes subjective. But at the very least, what I like to say is that what you can see in his work is intention. There's a difference between breaking the rules and lazy. And sometimes I think people assume that creating a abstract design is easy or will be faster. And it's actually not true. Um, it takes work and effort, and that's what I see in his work. Number two, he follows his intuition. Okay, so he says in his process that what he does is he kind of internalizes the message or the article or the product he's designing for, and then kind of lets his intuition guide him as he makes decisions for the photograph, the type style, and the way he constructs and builds the design around that. And using that artistic intuition, what do we call that? Talent, experience? I'm not sure. But I do know myself where you kind of get into this focus and this slipstream where you feel like, oh, things are really cooking and I'm just going to let it happen and not, follow some plan, but just kind of let it happen. He ignores the grid. In fact, he's anti-grid. When we work in graphic design, especially on the computer, we are constrained. Everything is square, perpendicular. Um, Everything is measured and perfect. And that's maybe one of the drawbacks of using the computer is everything is perfect. We need to allow things to be a little organic. And I think one of the common things that's going to start happening more often, especially in the world where we have AI and everything perfect around us, is we want a little bit of that organic mistake. We want to see something imperfect, right? And so that's what comes through in his artwork is that it's intentional, but it's also handmade and expressive. And so he didn't use a computer. Therefore, it has his trademark. Therefore, it's personal to him. Therefore, you might value it more. The other thing that his work does is it does communicate. Like it or not, it communicates. Here is an example of a poster design about an event that he would attend, right? Now, this breaks all the rules of communication and type design that you would learn in a marketing, advertising, and design class, because they would tell you, uh, can you even see the place or location? Can you even clearly see the time or the day? It's very confusing. That's going to confuse everybody. And it's almost like, you know what? It's going to confuse the right people that are going to ignore it. But the people we want to attend are going to be able to figure it out. It's almost like a little secret code, right? It's embedded in the design itself that it's going to attract the type of people that are going to want to hear from him. At the same time, it creates a little bit of mystery and interest, and it makes the viewer work a little bit. Is that good or bad? Is that effective as a design strategy? Hard to say. It really depends on the purpose. But I do think it's interesting, and it's a good tool to exercise. Is that when we get constrained and we feel like everything is too perfect, crisp, clean, maybe we need to sprinkle a little bit of David Carson in there and kind of push our work to a different level and let things be a little more natural, right? So that's why I want to share with you David Carson. Again, I don't personally design like he does, and I think that's fine. I think that's good. We're not all the same. but I do love looking at his work and getting inspiration for ways that I can make my things a little more natural, a little more off the cuff, a little more interesting. And with that, I think our work would communicate. All right. Thanks a lot. See you next time.